Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
Some things work better together. Like NARS's Soft Matte Complete Concealer and Radiant Creamy Concealer. Soft Matte Complete Concealer erases and blurs imperfections with full coverage. Then, Radiant Creamy Concealer evens and brightens with a luxurious texture and radiant finish. 2 concealers, 1 flawless look. Perfect for a no-foundation base. NARS, better together. Visit Ulta to shop now.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about how securely attached men feel about their sex life decreasing, because so many guys on the internet say there's only one way to feel, and that way is to basically hate her, hate yourself, and spiral into a depression, and that ain't true. So we will get to that as soon as I tell you to subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was on people-pleasing daughters of covertly narcissistic mothers. I had a post on this, and by request, I also did a podcast. By the way, if your wife's mother is terrible and she struggles with not being able to share her feelings for fear that there's going to be conflict, then this episode is for you. Or, of course, if you are a woman in that situation, then you already knew the episode was for you. Okay, so a lot of men say if your sex drive decreases, the only response is to be incredibly upset, think about it all the time, make analogies online to a starving man not having water in the desert. Sorry, a thirsty man not having water in the desert, a hungry man not having access to food. And that's just it. You know, you got to spiral into basically, a death spiral. And of course you would do that because that's the only way to respond. Now, does this seem right? I mean, if it does, then you're listening to the right podcast, right? Because I'm going to help you figure out that it's not right. But think about it. People go away to war and have different outlooks, you know? I mean, I used to work with combat veterans at the Charleston VA. People literally were in combat and thought about it differently. Better or worse than each other, you know? People can reframe any experience in any way that makes sense to them given their history, right? So I've mentioned this all the time, but combat veterans who got PTSD from their combat experiences, those people are likelier to be raised with childhood trauma and in unhappy homes with abuse. PTSD kind of builds on itself. If you have childhood PTSD, you're more likely to have adulthood PTSD, even from something that you might think is objective, like combat. It's not, there's nothing that works the same for everybody. There's people with cancer diagnoses that look on the bright side. You know, I mean, so obviously not having sex as much as you want is not like combat. It's not like cancer, right? I could think of some other C words. It's not like, but point is that you could think about anything differently. So let me give you kind of a little frame of how people feel when they're securely attached and their sex drive goes down. Well, first of all, they feel like a team with their spouse. So anything that's a problem is thought of as like them against the problem. So it's the couple on one side and the problem on the other side instead of me versus you. So instead of saying it's a bait and switch, she's tricking me, she doesn't value me, she doesn't love me, they know that she loves them. So they look for the simplest explanation, right? And in the simplest explanation is sex drive goes down over time and with age. And men who are really, evolved, shall we say, or just straight up smart, are like, well, I guess mine did too. I'm 45 now. It's not like when I was 20, and so it must be kind of similar for her, right? And of course, nothing feels like it did when we first met. We're doing all these dates. It's like new relationship. It's so, new love. So, things get boring over time, right? And so it must be like that for her. And of course, I have a higher sex drive. So these guys don't really come into therapy. I mean, they come into therapy for other things. But when we touch on their sex life, they're like, oh, yeah, after a few years, a lot of years often, it's not what it was, but it's still nice, when we have sex. right? And so that is a very securely attached perspective. Now, securely attached guys don't usually get into a sexless marriage because, as I've said over and over, sexless goes along with touchless, goes along with loveless. So even if the woman is saying that she loves you, but she can't have sex with you, that is not, and she may believe that, but that's not really how a securely attached, healthy woman would think. She would still be touching and doing some other stuff, even if she couldn't have sex. Now, after menopause, your drive goes completely away. And at that point, there's kind of a philosophical shift for many women. Like, that was then, this is now, like I am basically old. And old people don't really have sex. I mean, I know my parents didn't. I know my grandparents didn't at that age. And my vagina hurts. And that's kind of over for me. But they will still be touching and hugging and kissing. And they may still have some sex, of some sort. Maybe not with their vagina if it hurts, but, they will do a hand job or something like that. Or, use enough lube periodically that maybe it doesn't hurt as much. These are all things that I've heard from people that still prioritize a connection. It's not going to be obviously every day or even every week once you're much older and your hormones shift, but it will be periodically, but the touch doesn't go away. You're not, of course, necking like you did when you were young, but there is touch when you pass, when you hug each other, you kiss each other every day, you cuddle, you sit next to each other. This is, by the way, the thing that most guys say they miss the most, not just sex. So that brings us to the fact that securely attached guys are usually, in a securely attached relationship, and these are the people that were raised in happier homes or the people who went to therapy and figured out how to be in a loving, mutually respectful, close relationship, even if they didn't see it growing up. And there's a lot of hugging and laughing and hanging out together. And that's the thing is that when it's a completely sexless marriage, that's not kind of a normative, healthy outcome, because as I said, sexless goes along with touchless. And touchless is not usual for to be completely affectionless in a relationship unless you're unhappy, and if you're in an unhappy marriage, then it's like, that's not what happens to securely attached people. They don't stay in unhappy, distant marriages for decades. When there starts to be some sort of conflict about, let's say, parenting or in-laws or money, they frequently either go into therapy or they talk to somebody that they trust and they try to figure it out. It doesn't go into like a decade of no sex. That's just not, or touch, because as I said, these really co-vary. And I've never yet met a person in a sexless marriage that is happy with the amount of touching, loving, laughing, and connection that they have. It just doesn't happen. Again, until they're very, very old. And then, as I said, the securely attached guy is like, well, I guess she don't do that anymore, Literally, I guess she's a different person now. Just like if I was completely impotent and she wanted me to not be. Well, I can't not be. Because, of course, that just like everything else, there's no magic bullets. Viagra and Cialis do not work for everybody. They have side effects. Some guys get blurred vision, dry mouth, like crazy shit, right? And they can't take that. So the point is that securely attached people feel this way. As a TLDR, they feel, we love each other. We're very connected. Sex is going to wax and wane and then eventually wane and wane over the course of our long life together. That is what it is. We are a loving couple. We've been together. We have children, or we have community ties. We have a home. We have a network. We have our families. We share activities. We laugh together. We love each other. So sex is not the main part of our relationship anyway. It's a nice part of our relationship. But it is going to go down over time, as it went down even from when we were younger to now, and it will probably go down in the future from there. And it's easier to say that, obviously, if you were raised in a happy home, you see happy parents, and then you have more open conversations or even just illusions. You don't see your parents making out all the time when they're in their 60s, So you know that they love each other, but they don't do that anymore the same as they used to. And that's okay. And then if you say, well, what do you do with your sex drive then? Well, everybody doesn't get everything they want. What do you do with your drive to eat potato chips all the time? If you don't want to be somebody who eats 5 bags of potato chips, even though you like potato chips, because you don't think it would be good for your health, well, you just don't eat the potato chips, right? You just don't. Sometimes we just don't do things that we want to do. So, for example, And now I'll come to my big analogy. The securely attached woman, how does she view a lack of romance over time? That was then, this is now. Periodically for our anniversary or something, it would be nice to go out and to feel like we used to, but we're not going to have weekly date nights. We got kids now, And while I used to thrive on that and want long extended conversations for hours all the time, that's not the phase of life we're in. And that was just, dating stuff. And periodically we do it. And most of the time, though, we are in a family. And so they kind of can move on. That's the real thing I'm saying. Securely attached people do not perseverate on, I don't get every little thing I want, and that's what I talk about all the time in like the Cult of Boundaries and Preferences podcast. So when couples finally get to this idea, it's internal work, it's individual work. They haven't accepted that yet. And that's because they're not securely attached. And as I've taught you, the reason you wouldn't be securely attached is because as a child, you did not get the attention, love, validation, consistency, and reliability emotionally and or physically that you needed from a caregiver. And you could read the book Running on Empty, as I always recommend, to learn more about childhood emotional neglect. But when you felt like you didn't get your needs met as a child, then you obsessively advocate for them to be met internally with anger and thinking this person is doing you dirty, and externally by like following them around, classic preoccupied attachment, asking them to love you more and hang out with you more. This stuff comes because you have a deficit that you need to heal in therapy with deep introspection, understanding that you deserved that as a kid, where the connections are between what you didn't get as a child and what you yearn for now, which, by the way, for preoccupied people, if they don't work on preoccupied attachment, it's never enough. It's never, the amount of love, sex, etc. is never, ever enough. Because I get guys in session, they were having sex never. We get it up to once a week. And then within a few weeks, they're upset because she doesn't feel like doing it. She's not enthusiastic. It's not twice a week. Why can it never be 2 days in a row? And then even if we get it beyond that, then they're like, there's something else. Usually what it is she's not that into it, as I imagine that she should be. And when I say, but, you just wanted any sex. You came in saying, I really just want any sex. And she's older now. We learned so much about honeymoon stage, how she feels, her feelings about, her body, let's say, or she's depressed, or she's on SSRIs, or, she's just older now, or you guys have a history of marital discord, and that shit doesn't just go away overnight. They say, yeah, but, this still isn't kind of like what I was picturing. And what they were picturing is some sort of feeling that would repair all of their self-esteem issues and all of their hurt from childhood. It's the same as the women who are preoccupied attachment who keep you up all night talking and talking and talking and talking. The fantasy is to feel heard and to feel like you're fully there and attuned and present in a way that they never felt as a kid. But then, of course, as it goes into like hour 2 of this fucking conversation, the guy pulls away more and more. He's exhausted. He, of course, has whatever avoidant attachment he has, if she's preoccupied attachment. And even if we talk every week in couples counseling, which previously she would have thought, oh my God, a weekly conversation, I would kill for a weekly conversation. It's never enough until you actually drill down into the source of the insecurity and the self-worth issues, then it's never going to go away. Your partner can't fix that. Your partner cannot unilaterally give you enough attention and validation that it will soothe buried childhood trauma that you don't even admit exists. Although, obviously, as people learn more about each other and they learn more about each other's childhoods and their own and why they are reacting in these reflexive ways to each other and exacerbating each other's issues, then of course the marriage can grow more secure and happy. And at that point, it's ironic. She's trying to have more sex. He's trying to give more romance. And the other person is saying, oh, I accept that it can't be perfect. I accept that, don't do things you don't want to do. That's when the woman says, oh, actually, my husband should go to sleep at night because he's tired. He shouldn't have an endless conversation with me about what it meant when he said XYZ last week. Instead, she's learned to be more secure, right? So that's kind of the equivalent for the preoccupied attachment woman of the preoccupied attachment man who says, but what would I do if I want to have sex and I can't? That can't be the end of it. I can't not have sex if I want to. Well, yeah, and she can not have a conversation if she wants to, but yet both of you can, of course. And had you learned more self-regulation against a backdrop of increased self-esteem as a kid in a happier, stable home, you would have known, yes, there are things that I want and I don't get them because everything isn't perfect. We are a unit within a larger construct of a family, a community. We have careers, etc. We can't just focus on each other's needs constantly. And that's a fantasy born of, that's a childlike fantasy, right? And and just to be very practical about it, if she goes and has a conversation with her girlfriend, cool. And if he goes and masturbates, you know how I feel about porn, but if he goes and masturbates, once a week in the context of my wife is menopausal and we have sex every couple months, okay. That's how we do it at this stage if we love each other. Sometimes I feel like these people that comment, especially on the internet, they're like, don't you know that your partner might have Alzheimer's at some point? They might have dementia. They might not remember things. They might not be able to do anything that you think that they should be able to do. And a waning sex drive or a waning romantic drive or waning energy or different priorities at different times, that's just part of a life cycle. And that is how securely attached people feel that it is. Because, I get guys in for, let's say, anxiety or OCD or something like that, or job issues. And not everybody who's not having sex 5 times a week or 3 times a week or even once a week complains about it in the same way. If you did see a stable, loving home, you say things, and the woman, again, on the romantic side, says things like, yeah, of course, we don't have sex / go out or / talk as much as we used to, and that's what it is. We love each other. And, maybe when the kids are out of the house, then we'll reconnect a little bit more, or maybe this or that. But overall, we love each other. We're a good team. We spend time together. We kiss and hug. And this just isn't, we just don't have the sex the way that we used to. Of course not. And then we move on. But the guys that have the perseveration on the topic and come in expressly to address the topic, we always, just so you know, if you reach out to me for therapy or anybody for therapy or coaching, it is useless if you don't go back into family. It is useless if you do not go back into why are you uniquely so upset when everybody isn't so upset. And it's not about sex. As I say so many times, sex is not about sex. It's what this sex means. It's what's the larger context of the relationship. Why are you trapped in a dynamic where since you're a child, you always feel like you don't get enough love? How can we intervene on that variable instead of perseverating on something that is a proxy variable? All right. Well, I hope you guys like this. I hope that you appreciated the both sides of this. Preoccupied men and women can both identify with this podcast, even though I thought that it would just be about men to begin with. And I will talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys.